Hey, I'm Craig,
And I'm Norm.
and we created this game, Super Wild Rummitiles, and we just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of where that came from. It's kind of developed through playing Rummy Cube and then starting to modify the rules. And once you get going modifying, you can go kind of crazy sometimes. So,
Well, I've always loved Rummikub, and I've been playing it for years. It's always been my favorite board game. But I wanted to play it with my great grandkids, and I realized as I was thinking about introducing them to the game that the rule in Rummikub that you cannot play any tiles until you have 30 points if you add up all your tile numbers. And I said, well, that's too much like arithmetic, and it's a delay. I wanted to make the game simpler and easier for my great grandkids, so I just dropped that rule and said you can play right away.
yeah, and I mean, a lot of people have kind of house rules for stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like, you don't have to meld. Some people just skip over that. Some people will be like, yeah, you can do runs that wrap around from 13 to 1 and keep going. And other people say, no way. And there's a lot of different styles that people have for playing Rummikub.
So I moved into this apartment building, and I asked, we have a nice game community room where we play games, and I asked if anybody want to play Rummikub. It's my favorite game, and I got three people to join me, and I was thinking to myself, I'm going to show them my simplified version that allows you to play immediately. And before I got to that, another of the players named Arlene, she said, let me show you the way I play Rummikub. And she introduced what I had never seen before, a crisscross crossword style of playing Rummikub.
Right. So, like
Let's
like
see.
an example like this, like
There you go. So
being able to
it's
do a
the-
cross and
across,
up and
that's
down.
the standard Rummikub way, but the crisscross added the vertical to the horizontal. So
And then once you start talking about stuff like that, it just kind of
Well-
snowballs.
well, I
and
saw we played this way,
it's like,
and I said, "Wow, that is a really big improvement."
mm-hmm.
And then I started being open to some other ideas. Craig came along and said he found a website that had this crazy idea of sixes and nines being the same.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought, well, that's crazy. But then we started trying it and found it very useful. I liked it because I'd always had trouble confusing the sixes and nines.
Well, and
I
I
didn't
like
have to
it.
worry about that
I like
anymore.
it because it's like an extra dimension of the puzzle. So like it's an extra little tool you have in your tool belt, but you have to remember it. And it's kind of hard to remember at first. Like you're sitting
Well,
there with
yeah.
a 9, and like I could be sitting here with this 9 and it's like, oh, I can't play it. It's like, no, you can play it right here. You know, it's just, it goes there. It's a 6. And you know, some people like to turn them up the other way or whatever, but it's also simultaneously a 9 because of some of the
Sure.
other rules that we've put in there. So
So we
we're
could go
able to-
999.
or 9, 8, 7,
Yeah.
or whatever, and we're able to then have it be a 6 in one direction and a 9 in the other direction. So I never bother to flip it upside down because there is no upside down in my mind. It's a 6-9, a 9-6,
Yeah.
whatever. It's a
And
new
sometimes I have them in my hand and I can't even remember the difference. They're just a 9-6.
thing, right?
I also like that it's rather comical. I feel that it's rather humorous to play the 6 and the 9s simultaneously.
One of the other things that I kind of like about it is that it's kind of annoying to certain people that like to play Rummikub. And it's just, there are so many people that I've played Rummikub with over the years that are just like really militant about particular kinds of rules. So I like the fact that the freedom of the way that we have it here, it's all about having fun and playing the tiles. It's not about
Yes.
a tournament or any like really, you know, rigid way of doing something. One of the things we do at the end of every game, you know, once someone has won, is we play out all the rest of the tiles. because it's just fun to play tiles.
Sure.
And then that helps the person learn, if it's a new person doing it, we've got to go open face with them and everyone can help find where the tiles go, and it becomes a really interesting puzzle.
I'm thinking chronologically. I think maybe the next big thing was that I came up with the idea. I was looking at a situation with the wild card and thinking to myself, it's
What is
why
it?
does it,
Yeah.
why can't it still be wild? It's been used once, but let's come along and use it
Right.
as something else.
Right, and let it simultaneously be both of those things. And that's another one of those rules. When you first do that, it's kind of like, no, that would be too powerful or whatever. And it's like, yes and no, because we balance it out with other rules. So it's super wild.
Well, yes,
but-
pointed out to me that it was super wild.
Right. And
Because
that kind of became the
it
name of the
can
game.
go in all kinds of directions,
Mhm.
like these two 13s
Yeah.
can be used there as 13, 13, 13.
Yeah.
And it's also 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep. Yeah, so that was one of them, and then that became this special piece. I mean, of course, we just started out using the Rummy Cube piece, but then we decided it was so special, it
yeah.
really deserved its own thing, and it's central to the game. So that becomes the anchor, and that starts. This is the start of the game board. You start with the wild. You're not randomly drawing it and being like the lucky person that got a wild, and then the only thing you get to use it as a blue 3, and it's stuck that way for the whole game. It's like it was wild, but just barely. This is wild constantly. Things move and shift around it. It is the center of the game, and it enables all the other rules to click together.
In Rummy Cube, there's just the one. There are 2 wild cards, or wild tiles, I should say, and there is a part of the game where you can replace the wild tile by replacing it with something from your
Right,
hand
right.
that's the same. We don't do any of that because we keep reusing the wild
Right.
card as it.
Yeah,
as it is.
that's another one of those rules. That's part of Rummy Cube. The way some people play it, some people allow you to, break apart sets with a wild. Some people will not let anything be touched to it until you can replace it with the exact.
Oh yeah.
And that it's just not fun to me. It's like it restricts something that's a very dynamic part of the game, but you can't do it because it's locked up, and people want to just have a rule that makes it not as fun to play. So the challenge is keeping it fun to play without making it too easy, right? So that's what we've been balancing back and forth for the last year or so, trying to come up with that good balance that makes the games fun and unpredictable, but not where you feel like you're constrained by the rules.
The next, and I
Right.
really.
Well, because it was a natural thing, right? So if you have this 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you do crisscross, and okay, that's valid in crisscross. So I'm like, this should be valid because it's just a change of geometry. You just bent the thing. So that created the idea of an adjoined set.
So here we have 2 adjoined sets, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this is 5, 5, 5, and they're adjoined.
Yep. And as long as each one has 3, so you couldn't do that because that's not a set that stands alone.
Right.
But as long as each group is 3 things, then it's fine, and they can be adjoined. And that's super powerful, and also a nice added piece to the puzzle because it's a little harder to see. Your mind has to think of things differently.
Yes.
Especially if this starts going across
A wild
across a wild. You could do this. You don't even need that extra 5 now because that's a set. And this is, oh, sorry, that's a bad example. I need to do that. Yeah, 3, 4, that's the 4.
Yeah.
And then the 5s, that's a set.
Yes.
And that is actually a set across there. That's a set by itself as well. But so, as far as reusing the wild, you have to be able to just satisfy both sides of that. And now the wild is kind of captured as it goes across. But if you come in with another 5, you can free that up. and that stands alone by itself. So that's the dynamic part of it. It just makes everything so changeable in the game. Keeps it exciting. What was next? What
Well,
else did we add,
I-
do you think, after that? Well, we
Well-
started adding dimensions. So,
Oh, yes.
in addition
yes.
to-
the crisscross added a second dimension. Normally, Rummikub is just horizontal, but
Right.
we added the crisscross, the
right,
vertical.
so we've got, oh, sorry, like that. Okay, so we can go,
How about, well, actually, Joe, a friend of ours, said, why don't you have three-dimensional?
I think he was being a little bit facetious.
I'm not
maybe,
sure he
but-
was serious. He was teasing me, I
So-
think, a little, but I said, well, I don't know whether we could do that. And
we
so I gave it some
contemplated it.
thought, and I said, well, yes, I think we could, because I could imagine,
Let's see. We need some more tiles out here.
oh, here's a couple of 13s.
Okay.
So here's
Here's
a
another
couple of 13s. Let's go three-dimensional and stack those 13s on top of the wild, for instance.
So maybe the wild is already used
Yeah.
in the other directions. You know, it's all used up.
Okay,
So then,
and
you
so
put
I,
the 13s.
so I said, I think that makes sense. So
But-
I call this a stack or a tower on top of a base tile, and
I'm not sure who
Okay.
noticed it first, but the first thing that you notice is like, okay, the wild in the other dimensions, you can go through it. So it would be nice to go through it three-dimensionally as well.
you suggested that, and I said, well, how can you do that? You can only go up, you can't go
Right, how can
down.
you go down? So, so say we have the one here, and now we can, just like we were doing it as if it were like this, and the wild, we need a different one.
Yeah,
Maybe 11. So
okay.
say we could do this and it could go through. So if we do that three-dimensionally, we're just gonna say 13, 13, black 13 is going on top, and then underneath is the 11 in black.
So the 11 is going down into the basement, or what did you say?
The dungeon,
The
there, I
dungeon,
think,
yeah.
yeah, so
So these are stacking up in a tower,
a tower and a
and
dungeon.
that's going down
Yeah.
in a dungeon.
So now, obviously, this creates a problem where you kind of start covering things
What are
up.
those
And
again?
you also start forgetting what's there. It also is a little bit overpowering because it gives you two more directions to build off of.
Well,
So we
I-
made it an optional rule. We've kept it around because it's a lot of fun, especially if you get bored with some of the other rules. To just throw in something like this can be a lot of fun.
Well, it's so hard to see what they are. I suggested, well, why don't we spread them out like that? And we remember that they're going like,
And
it's
then we're
3D.
pretending they're 3D,
But,
but
oh, look at that. There's another way we could be playing tiles.
Yeah.
So I called it fourth dimension.
right.
This stacking
then-
is third dimension, and this is a fourth dimension. Whoa, there's another diagonal.
Yeah, that one's
There's a
just begging
fifth.
to be used.
So
then
we
that-
have five
yeah.
dimensions for playing tiles.
Right, and then you can still stack on top of that. And then at that point, it becomes like super concentrated around the wild, and it becomes a little bit too easy to build off the wild, and you kind of don't do other things. So we don't like to combine all those rules unless you're just having just a silly fun game or something. But those are really fun optional rules to play around
Yes,
with, to like turn
yeah.
on and off, to have different kind of styles of games.
So you can play several different versions of our game, depending on which optional rules you include or
And-
don't include. Everybody has to agree before you start the
Just
game
so
which ones you're going to use.
People are probably wondering, yes, of course you can go 2D on the other axis and stuff too, as you build
Yeah.
out. So things start running into each other very
Well,
quickly.
yeah,
And you end up closing yourself off
Well,
from
what,
other options.
what if you had this?
Mhm.
That barely fits.
Yeah,
Well, what if you tried to do this?
Yeah,
Well,
that
no,
doesn't
no,
fit.
no, that's hopeless. So it takes some strategy in arranging geometrically.
yeah. We also do the 3D other ways too. Now, it doesn't just have
Oh,
to be
yeah, it
off
doesn't
of the
have to be
wild,
off the wild
so
card.
that's another way you can kind of help control some of that spacing problem. Or you can do going through the wild diagonally into an adjoined group, into a crisscross. I mean, you just start combining all of those things, and you end up with game boards that look fairly incomprehensible to a Rummikub player, but are totally within the rules of our game. It's a lot of fun. So
Another thing, I'm not sure exactly what order it came, but in Rummikub you normally start with 14 tiles. We have decided to start with 6 tiles. It actually simplifies the game and makes it
harder.
short. It's shorter. It actually makes it harder.
It does make it harder, yeah, because if you have too many tiles, it's too easy to play them because so many tiles get out on the board. So especially, it's the game is quite different if you have 2 players or 3 players or something too. Like changing the number of players can really change the way that the board forms. But starting with 6 tiles was a really good compromise that took away some of the power of the wild and some of the other things.
We tried different numbers. We tried starting with 12 for a while.
And that worked pretty well,
But there was a problem.
yeah, it created a pattern.
A pattern.
Yeah.
You could predict, whoever starts is likely to be the winner.
Yeah. Usually they can't go out on the first time, but it goes around and then there's enough tiles on the board that they're able to go out with whatever they had left.
So it was too easy.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like 80% of the time the person that started would win the game. So like, well, we can't have that. It needs to be tougher than that. And reducing the number of tiles did the trick.
You know,
It really balanced the game out well. And I think that's pretty much all of the rules.
no, there is a big rule change. In Rummikub, if you can't play, you have to draw a tile, and then you can't play that until
Yeah,
your
you lose
next
whole
turn.
Yeah, that's your whole turn.
But in Super Wild Rummitiles, you can play the tile you drew immediately if it plays.
And any others, if that allows you.
Oh yeah, that may
Yeah.
let
It may
you
break it
open
loose.
everything
Yeah.
up. Like if
Your
the
turn
wild,
continues.
the wild is blocked, and you draw a tile that opens it up.
And you can play.
You can play
several other
maybe
tiles.
the
You might
rest of
even
your
go out.
tiles,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So that it's another rule that just it's just making rules that enable people to play and do the fun part of the game rather than
seems like
restricting.
Rummikub is adding restrictions and rules to make the game less fun.
Harder. Yeah.
Harder.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, like one of the worst thing in Rummikub, and I think any of us that have ever played more than a few games of Rummikub have had this. If you play with the classic rules, sometimes you're that guy that's sitting there that's got 30 tiles in your rack because you can't get to 30 to mount.
yeah.
And someone else wins before you even have a chance to get on the board.
Yeah.
And like you can see spots for all of your tiles out there, but you're not allowed to play. And that's just infuriating. Almost as
Sure.
bad as playing Monopoly or something, some other horrible game, you know? So, we try to do away with those rules while at the same time keeping it challenging. And I think we've come to that balance. These are really solid games, and they're very different. We play this every week, and you play it probably every day.
Yeah,
And-
every evening I think I play 15 or 20 games with friends here.
Yeah, and even if a game isn't going your way, I mean, there's a whole bunch more games you can play, and it's just a few minutes to flip through it, and you'll be back on it in the next one. But even if someone else goes out, you still get to play all your tiles, so it's still fulfilling to complete the game, even if you're not the winner.
Oh yeah. You might feel that you're getting a little tired of the game. Anytime you do that, you can add or subtract some of the optional rules, which changes the game quite a bit. Like it change it from fast games to slower games, easier games to harder games more challenging, more puzzling. The easier games are quick and fun, but not as challenging.
Yeah. So personally, I like playing without diagonals and 3D because that, to me, is kind of the right balance of having the freedom of like the wild and the ability to do join groups and all that kind of stuff is really good, and it's not overpowering if there's just 4 ways to build off of the wild. That it fits for me.
And we play with diagonals allowed, but no 3D.
Okay.
But you can have a combination of optional rules to fit what you find
Yeah.
the most fun.
They're fairly simple to just turn on and off easily. The core rules work really well, even if you add in the other ones. It just, diagonals and 3D tend to make it a little bit easier and quicker because you have more ways to play off of the super wild.
Right. But there are advantages and disadvantages to each of those optional rules.
We always use this bag for drawing rather than spreading the tiles out, because then you don't have to flip them upside down.
Oh,
and all that
yeah.
kind of stuff. So it also, you get to look at the nice, cool looking bag with the little dangly things on it and have some fun. That way you can just
Sounds
keep
good.
the board is really neat. It's not doesn't have a huge pool of tiles all over, and this just passes around easily.
But
Cool.
there was something else I
So-
wanted to talk about. As we were playing, we were playing, and
Yeah.
you kept thinking we were using these big, wide Rummy Cube racks to hold the tiles. And we were only using 6. We didn't need that.
Well, we were
huge
using
rack.
12 at the time. This
12,
can hold
yeah, that's
12.
right. And so Craig came up with the idea of making a smaller rack that holds 12.
Yep.
And we only use 6 right now, but that gives us a little extra room for sorting, which is really
And sometimes
useful.
you draw a few, and you can get more
Yeah.
than 6.
But he first he was making them with his 3D printer, and I don't have an example to show you of those, but they were really nice and about the same size, except they stood tall.
They had an angle on
Yeah.
them, and they had tiers, kind of like some of the other Rummy Cube racks.
And I was concerned that they were too thick.
Yeah,
And-
because you're carrying it in a bag, and it
Yeah.
gets pretty thick if you get 6 of them in there.
So
It also took a long time. It took like an hour to print every single one of them, so
Yeah.
it was a lot of time.
And so you came up with a new idea. Before, it was a solid rack that would hold the tiles in it.
Right, it had a bottom as opposed to being clear through.
And you came up with the idea, how about making them thinner and with just slots instead of a full rack?
Right.
And you did
And
that
cutting
with,
them on a laser printer,
Well-
laser cutter.
well, first you did it as 3D printing,
I did,
and you found it was much faster than
Yes.
doing the big one.
yes.
But then you tried doing it with the laser printer instead,
Yes.
and that was much faster.
Right, yeah, so it takes a couple minutes to cut this. It takes more with the logo, but it's a couple minutes to cut one of these, as opposed to even the smaller version of the rack 3D printed is 30 to 45 minutes probably.
And then you started experimenting with other colors
Oh,
of
yeah.
this acrylic.
Yeah,
And this
and it comes in so many vibrant colors, and
this neon
Yeah,
just glows.
it's just fantastic. It just dresses up the game so much. And then at that point is when it kind of became like, you know what? This is not only fun to play, and we'd like to see other people play it, but like we can make a really beautiful version of this game that's like actually very nice, and it's like all these cool pieces, and it's very visual and tactile and stuff, and it just adds a lot to the game.
Now, we gradually found as we were playing all these games that we would sometimes lose track of whose turn it was
Well, yeah,
to
because
start. 'cause
like
you're
you don't
supposed
even
to
remember
alternate.
who won, and you're like going along, like everyone's playing out, and it's like, okay, well let's go to the next round. Whose turn is it anyway? And everyone's been playing.
So we have this starting player token that we just pass from player to player.
All 3D, all cut with the laser and embossed and stuff. So just really cool and slick looking.
And there was another thing. We would play so many games because the games are rather short compared to a Rummy Cube game, which can take a long time. So we were playing lots and lots of games, and we trying to remember who won the most games.
Because we
And
don't keep score. We don't count up tiles and stuff like you would in Rummy Cube.
so then Craig got the idea of putting little holes in the rack, and then putting these pegs in to show every time you win a game. So
A little trophy row.
this shows me I won 2 games. Good
Oh,
for
it doesn't
me.
just show you, it shows everybody.
Everybody can see. Yeah.
Yeah, it's right out front. You need to display your trophies. Tiny little metal trophies. So yeah, it's a long journey to get here, but we've got a nice polished thing. Comes in a great little bag, and we took these little iconic things that are so much part of the game and just made little versions of them to tie on the ends of the thing, just to class it up and just have fun with it. And this is the whole game. It all fits in here, and you can carry it around everywhere. Just really slick and a lot of fun. And we have found, even as different as the rules are, having new people play it, that sometimes if they're familiar with
Yeah.
Rummy Cube, or even people that haven't played Rummy Cube, can catch on pretty quickly.
Really fast.
Yeah.
I've been surprised at how quickly people would adjust to the crazy rules that we have.
In some sense, I think some people that haven't played a lot of Rummy Cube pick it up easier, because the Rummy Cube people have their set rules in mind, and they
Yeah.
see it. They don't. It's harder to see these new patterns because you're so used to seeing it
Yeah.
a certain way. But that's a fun way to unlearn and relearn a different variation of a game. I think it would be hard for me to go back to playing regular Rummy Cube at this point.
I'm not interested. It used to be
Yeah.
my favorite game, and now, no, this is my
Right.
favorite game.
Right.
I
We still love Rummy Cube, and we love how we got here from it. We make these things. These are actual, genuine Rummy Cube tiles. We buy them. We just buy sets of them. We don't have any duplicates, so one set of Rummy Cube becomes 2 games that we're able to make. But we sit here and manually go through them and sort them all out into 2 sets, and have the genuine Rummy Cube tiles. And we get the kind that are painted, because you reach into the bag to pick them out, and that would be cheating if you can feel the bumps.
Yeah.
I think you have a set that has the
Yes, I have a
embossed,
set
and
that
that's-
are embossed,
Yeah.
and I'm sometimes tempted
draw quickly. Don't feel
to
around
do a
too
little
much.
braille.
Yeah. It's actually remarkably difficult to figure out what a number is very quickly with your fingers. I've found, but this way is better. The Rummy Cube tiles are great, and they fit perfectly inside these things. And you also have a small set. They make a travel size set, and they fit in the racks as well too, if you want to get a travel set. We have one of the places that we play has this tiny little table that's only like 11 or 12 inches wide maybe, and the small set is great for playing on that, because you can make runs in any direction and you don't run out of table space. So yeah, that's kind of the story.
I think it is.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey, and now we're making it available for people to get and join in the fun. And we'd love to have you play it and hear what you like about the game, and what you found that keeps you interested in playing super wild Rummitiles instead of regular old Rummy Cube.
It's not your grandmother's game.
That's right. It is a totally different game. It really is different. And I think you've probably seen that by some of the stuff that we've shown, but it is wild, and it is different, and it is a lot of fun. Over and over again. You can play a lot of games. It's very repeatable, very replayable, and entertaining.